Every financial crisis ends with the same theater. Politicians rush to microphones. Bankers look solemn, and new laws are rushed through under the banner of protecting the public. The message is always the same. Don't worry, we've learned our lesson. The system will be safer now. But history shows something very different. Time and again. The laws written in the aftermath of collapse weren't designed to protect you. They were designed to protect the banks to very institutions that caused a disaster in the first place. And while the names of these laws change, the pattern doesn't. The system is never broken. It's rigged. The story goes back much further than Wall Street or the 2008 crisis. In the 19th century, Britain faced a series of banking panics. The response was the Bank Charter Act of 1844. It was sold to the public as a reform to stabilize money. In reality, it cemented the Bank of England's monopoly over currency issuance. Smaller banks were forced out, and the state's chosen bank became untouchable. It wasn't about protecting ordinary depositors. It was about protecting the banking system itself and concentrating its power. Across the Atlantic, during the Civil War, the U.S. government introduced the National Banking Acts. The claim, a safer, unified currency. The reality, these laws forced banks to buy government bonds to issue notes. In other words, the government turned banks into its captive finance. It was a brilliant trick. Disguised debt monetization as public protection. Fast forward to the Great Depression. Banks had collapsed by the thousands. Out of this storm came the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, famous for separating commercial and investment banking. It was marketed as protecting citizens from speculation, and for a while, it seemed to work. But Glass-Steagall also restored public trust in the system without changing its underlying logic. The leash eventually loosened, and decades of lobbying gutted the act just in time for the next crisis. And then there was deposit insurance. Born in 1933, the creation of the FDIC was sold as a shield for small depositors. It sounded like a victory for the little guy, but in practice, it removed the natural discipline of the market. Before FDIC, banks had to act prudently or lose trust. After FDIC, depositors stopped caring. Why worry if the government has your back? This freed banks to take bigger risks, knowing their losses would ultimately be socialized. Once again, a law written in the name of protection served as a hidden subsidy for banks. Perhaps the most audacious law of the Depression era was the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. Franklin Roosevelt announced a bank holiday, closing every bank. When they reopened, the government had effectively seized control of gold. Citizens were told to turn in their gold for paper dollars. It was framed as a patriotic sacrifice. In reality, it stripped ordinary Americans of hard assets and delivered them to the banking system. What was presented as protection for depositors was in fact protection for the financial order itself. The pattern didn't end. It just got bigger. Think of the 2008 crisis, when mortgage-backed securities imploded. Millions of people lost homes and jobs. The banks at the center of the disaster. Rescued by law. In the United States, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, funneled hundreds of billions into the financial sector. Ordinary families were foreclosed on. Small businesses folded. But the banks were stabilized with taxpayer money. Europe did the same. In Ireland, Spain, and Greece, governments guaranteed bank debts, piling them onto taxpayers. Austerity laws were passed in the name of stability, but stability meant ensuring creditors were paid, not citizens kept whole. Then came the European Stability Mechanism in 2012. A permanent shield for citizens. No, a permanent bailout fund for banks, with citizens paying the price through us. Even the Basel Accords, international regulations meant to curb risk-taking, gave large banks more ways to game the system. This is the uncomfortable truth. Whenever a crisis hits, the laws that follow are presented as safeguards for the public, but they always serve the same master: the preservation of the financial system. You, the citizen, are useful only insofar as your trust and your tax money can be mobilized to keep the bank standing. So what's the lesson? Laws around money are never neutral. They are written by governments in partnership with banks, with one priority: the survival of the financial system, not your savings. To understand this, you must strip away the language of protection and ask, who benefits? More often than not, the winners are the banks, while the losers are the people who believed the promise. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And in this rhyme, the verse is always the same. When crisis strikes, laws will be written. They will be marketed as protecting you, but in reality, they are protecting the banks from you. If you want real financial freedom, you can't outsource your safety to the system's promises. You need to understand how the system works and build wealth that ISNT erased every time the next protection law is passed. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and here at the Financial Historian, I'll show you where to look.